agenda for the special meeting. You give us just a minute.
Congratulations.
Sure appreciate it.
He just pulled into the lot.
Bill.
No, but I have to shovel it. Steve can't shovel.
Where'd he go?
I did the last time at 10:30 and it was still clean this morning. Yeah, you still got another inch or something.
He texted me 3 minutes ago. He had just pulled in the lot, so he should be here shortly. Holy cow.
Excuse me.
Where's the council?
Jumpy?
Throwing stuff at me. What's going on?
There needs to be something on the agenda. I think it's all about this sustainable local government collaboration.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is our December 9th workshop. And first up is our budget planning and self-supported municipal improvement districts, the SMIDs. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott Sanders.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning, Scott.
Sorry about the delay there. Got the opportunity to jump-start a car this morning.
How'd it go for you?
It went all right.
Okay.
It was the wife's car, and I told her, "You're on your own," and I thought, no, that's not the right answer. I won't help you with that. You also will have one of these in front of you. You'll remember a year ago, we had handed these out somewhat in draft form still, and I think we got really good reviews on it, so we decided we should reproduce this for the 2013 numbers as well. And so this is the SMID review, if you will, annual review. It's got a lot of great information in there about SMIDs in general, as well as the specifics on each of the SMIDs that we do have. The new reincarnation, if you will, of the Ingersoll is now the Grand Ingersoll. And so you'll see some numbers increasing pretty dramatically now that we have parts of Grand Avenue and a higher tax rate associated with that one as well. So this is more of just a handout for you to have as a reference point for the different SMIDs. And so I'll leave that with you. And then as far as the budget discussions this morning, there are two topics that we want to cover. The parking system as well as the SMIDs, and we're not going to be able to have all the detail on the SMIDs. I'll go through that with you as we go along here. As far as where do these two budgets fit into our larger budget discussion, we're going to come back to this slide with each budget discussions just to kind of remind you of the different pieces, if you will, of the budget. We are not talking about the general fund this morning, the largest piece of the operational budget. But the SMIDs do fall in under special revenue funds, and the parking is one of our enterprise funds. So first we'll talk about the SMIDs. And the four SMID districts, they're independent, and they each have their own tax rate abilities. And they also have different mechanisms for flow of funds. You'll see here that Sherman Hill now, the last couple years, is paying their own bills and then submits a reimbursement to the finance department, and then we will reimburse them. So the SMID tax rate and revenues that the City Council certifies for Sherman Hill, those funds stay in a special revenue fund at the city until the reimbursement request comes to us, and then we make those payments. Highland Park is a simpler SMID, if you will, and so the expenses are actually paid just directly out of the special revenue fund at the city. So that's all handled here at the city. Now, Ingersoll and downtown are different. Ingersoll Grand and downtown, in that the certified revenues, as we receive those, are then passed on to those two associations and the boards that govern those. And so those are a slightly different mechanism for the flow of funds. And then each year, we ask the boards of these 4 SMIDs to submit budgets. We have all but the downtown one figured out at this point. And so this conversation this morning, we'll have some details on the other 3, but the downtown SMID, we're going to have to come back to you, and I'll show you why that's the case in a future slide here. And then it's up to the City Council to extend the SMIDs. As they do have sunset clauses, that's a requirement, and so then there's an opportunity to extend those, and that's the situation we're under with the downtown. We need to actually extend it, and so we need to figure out what those terms are going to be for the downtown SMID.
Is that because of the new area that was incorporated?
For downtown?
Right.
No, it's actually just the sunset was set for June of 2014. And so we just need to work through what those details are going to be for assumably the next five years, I believe. This is just the magnitude to give you a feel for there's quite a bit of difference between when you're dealing with the amount of money in the downtown SMID versus some of these others. Again, the Highland Park is the simplest of the 4 with the smallest amount of monies as well. The Sherman Hill, this is just some background, similar information that's what in the booklet. Established back in '97. It's got a few years left on the current agreements. And the expenses somewhat similar in that they are for the lighting, the replacement as necessary as accidents do occur with those poles, the utility costs associated with that, and some insurance in case, again, there's damage. We like to have some insurance available for those. Similar again to the booklet, these are the annual revenues and expenses that we've been seeing. There is one variation you'll see there, asterisk in 2012. That's simply a timing for the reimbursements when they started doing the bills themselves, and you'll see how in 13 it jumped back up. So that's just a timing issue from when the reimbursement needed to occur.
Do they have any administrative fees? Are they eligible to reimburse themselves for the individual that's doing all of the checks and?
I would have to double check with the actual documents, because when it comes to SMIDs, you have to spell out exactly what you're allowed to expense. We typically allow for administrative costs. I know we've got it in the other 2.
Yeah.
I would have to, unless anyone knows specifically.
Okay. That's fine.
We can check on that for you. It's an easy change if that's something that they want to do.
Scott, if the SMID were to run out and their ending fund balance, they have over 200,000 there, can they use that to continue paying for this stuff? What happens to that fund balance?
Yes, no. Those funds have to be spent in this SMID for these purposes. Now, they can extend beyond we'd have to still have an extension to understand where they're going to spend the monies, but if they decided to no longer generate new revenues, current revenues, that would be an option to spend. And that question's being asked of the board, what their plans are there. And we just don't have an answer yet from them how they wanted to handle that. Because there's all kinds of options, lowering the rate or capital.
If they chose, could they just say, for 5 years, we're not going to pay into the SMID because we've got a balance large enough to cover it?
All kinds of options.
Okay.
Lower it temporarily for 5 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Highland Park, somewhat similar and yet very simple with the street light repairs, maintenance, utilities. They do have the streets, the signage that goes over as well to keep that maintained. It's also got through 2019 arrangements in place. Pretty consistent year to year. Did purposely spend down a little bit of the balance upon asking about that one a year ago. So we're in a similar situation, just a year in advance here. And plenty of capacity if they wanted to do more as far as the maximum rate. Well over $2 is available to them. Then the Ingersoll Grand, again, this was previously a much smaller SMID, so the area was expanded. It says here established January 2013, but essentially reestablished. Quite a bit more intended for this SMID as far as you'll see there. There's even a Goodwill Ambassador program. Clearly some marketing objectives there for business retention and even growth. It sounds like there's a lot of ambitious plans for redevelopment and then keeping the higher level, if you will, of the sidewalks and things maintained as well with the planters and whatnot. The numbers behind the Ingersoll Grand, you'll see in the bottom left there how the 2013-14 fiscal year that we're in now reflects the larger area, the larger valuation that includes parts of Grand Avenue and more of Ingersoll, as well as the rate moving from 175 to 225. So they're generating just under $200,000 a year for those activities that they have planned. The arrangement on the top right you'll see is that they've also contracted with the Downtown Community Alliance, the same organization that's managing the downtown SMID as well. Just a little more detail on what the 2015 is looking like. It's very consistent with what we have in the current year. There's also a nice feature here for the city in the sense that they are putting aside $10,000 a year of their current revenues for maintenance reserve so that they have cash flow in case there is a damage done or something of that nature that repairs are necessary. So we thought that was critical so that as again, a reincarnated SMID, we wanted to make sure that they had fund balance available to them for these more expensive features that are along the avenues. So,
Scott,
just
back
a few-
one slide, looks like the city is supplementing this SMID. Additional
In the-
city expenses.
In the past, that was the case, that there was some city costs. Which part are you referring to there?
Additional city expenses.
Yes, that line there.
3652.
Yes, and I guess I'm not familiar with the current year, if that's even
The city will no longer be doing maintenance.
right, because they have taken over the maintenance
Of the plantings and the
right.
beautification.
Do you get a breakdown, Scott, of the expenses of DCAs? And in terms of the previous question regarding administrative expenses of some of these, Christine asked that question. Do we know what administrative expenses we're paying here, or
Yes.
this group is paying?
Yes, and I should say that I personally do not attend these meetings, but we do have representatives from the city as far as community development, and I believe others that attend as many of these meetings as they can, because there's, especially with the downtown organization, they have operational committees as well as the board. So we have city manager representatives as well on attending these. So
City manager, I think, has a question.
Sure.
Just for you and for the council, on the expense line, when you look at streetscape and landscape, it's $65,000 a year, and then you go forward. That cost for streetscape and landscape maintenance is really the first call on the Schmid dollars, and then what's available over that can be used for their purposes. Just to
Correct.
clarify, yeah.
Yes. Okay. And then, like I mentioned, on the downtown, you'll see that this one expires this upcoming June. And so there's discussion underway now to figure out what the terms essentially need to be to extend it another 5 years. And there's, as you might imagine, with the downtown, there's quite a few different arrangements in the sense of several areas, public areas that need to be attended to, different levels of service. Parks is working with them to understand an exact scope of services. That's going to be very helpful, specifying who's responsible for each different area and type of service that's being provided. Everything from the principal Riverwalk, which is mentioned here, even portions of the East Village streetscape. So it's a very large area. The scope of services is rather extensive. And so we want to make sure we get those terms agreeable and understand exactly what those terms are. In the past, we have participated in an in-kind contribution with plantings and whatnot, so there'll be discussions in those areas as well. Cleaning space, there's public safety aspects to this. There will be a need for the city to retain insurance responsibilities. That's going to probably be the easiest way to handle any liability issues as well. So there'll still be, regardless, there's definitely going to be a city element of involvement here. So we will come back to the council when we have a line item budget, if you will, with terms that we can express to you in long term, 5 years, not just the 15. So we'll be coming back to those details with you.
Scott, do you have more on downtown?
Just the numbers, and
Okay.
you'll see how those have shaked out.
This might be more of a policy question than a financial question, so kick it to Rick or someone, but as we don't have the downtown budget finalized, is this a matter of them making a proposal to us that we will respond to, or them finishing their work, or it's a negotiation between us and them?
Let me try, Scott. Mr. Coleman, council members, we're working through negotiations with Operation Downtown, trying to resolve those numbers. But the question you ask is a critical one. Scott and I have talked about this a bit. Glenn Lyons is here as well. We intend to bring this back to you later this spring, maybe May, June timeframe, and go through those numbers in some detail. There are significant expenses here that have to be addressed. This is an excellent source to address those maintenance expenses on our downtown spaces, and we'll be doing that. But the question you raise is a very good one.
One of the things that I want to make sure is that the council's role in this is not at the very end when it's all over. I don't know if that's my role or not, so since we're talking about it, let me say this. I think one of the great things to happen in our city is the creation of world-class public spaces, public art, the landscaping that goes along with it. But over time, those are very costly. And I think we sold, those all to our citizens of us participating at the front end, that the Schmid was going to be there to help maintain that. And I hope that becomes kind of the strongest focus of the Schmid in maintaining the infrastructure that we've already built and that we have. And that's from kind of an operations and maintenance, both of those. I know that's our primary focus in all the other Schmids, and it should be downtown as far as I'm concerned too.
Mr. Coleman, you're absolutely right about that. And I want to give some credit to the mayor, who at the very beginning, when we started talking about Principal Riverwalk and other things, the mayor was one of the first to say, look, we're going to embrace that project, but we're going to do so with the understanding that those maintenance costs have to be addressed long term. And we've worked hard to try to do that over the years. And now, finally, at the end of the line here, when these spaces are really coming online and the costs are becoming fairly significant, it's important that we address those. So your question is a good one. This is the proper context to do it. We're going to drill into that. We'll make sure the council's informed all the way along and that you have a chance to review the numbers before anything is finalized on it.
Now, is there, the other piece of this is also the Riverfront Development Authority, is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Is that a separate agreement, or that gets entwined into this?
It really gets entwined into this.
Yeah.
And we've already approved, we just approved that, didn't we? Wasn't that just approved?
Well, the RDA agreement was approved several years ago as part of the part of the
But I was
principal
thinking there was just
Riverwalk project.
a change or something new that came through in the last few council meetings?
Not on the RDA. You've
Okay.
taken individual actions on things like the skating rink and some other elements of the
Maybe that's what I'm
Riverwalk,
thinking
but
of.
not,
Okay.
but not, the RDA's been in place for a while.
And so for the city budget that we have to submit to the state, it's as simple as what's the tax rate for each of the SMIDs and the valuation. And so there's no change expected for the rates. It's still be the $1.15 for fiscal year 15. That's all the detail that we have to submit for the March 10th council meeting and approval of budget. So as Rick has mentioned, the detailed budget of how the line items shake out would likely occur after that.
Jeff, I have a question for you. Just thinking about this and the agreements we have with private entities to manage this. It's a tax, it's a SMID, which is different, voluntary and all that. But because it comes through City Hall, is there a different level of accountability that the council has for SMID dollars once they're allocated? Or do we have the same level of responsibility and accountability for SMID dollars as we would our property tax dollars?
I believe that, excuse me, I believe that thank you, Mayor, the SMID dollars are allocated there by council. Council ultimately makes a determination. There's advisory boards that will ask the council on where the money should go or give advice, but it's up to council ultimately to make that determination.
Those boards are advisory in capacity.
Yes, sir, and that's by statute.
I think of it as a sub-grantee situation, so we still need to be critical of how those expenses are maintained. Any other questions on the SMIDs? The second.
One question here I see on the downtown that they're supported through TIF also.
Yes.
And that's the only one I think that I saw that on.
Yes, and that was actually a change that was brought about by the county auditor. In the years past, what we had was, prior to fiscal year 13, the SMID rate was not being captured as part of the TIF. So that $1 rate back then would generate over $1 million of revenue and come in to the city as SMID revenue that we then passed on to them. The change in 2013 was that the county auditor decided, with some change in staff on their part, that really that $1 SMID rate should be captured like any other operating levy of another taxing authority and flow through the TIF. So at that point, we scrambled and made arrangements so that we were still keeping the SMID whole, but now the funds, that $1 that is inside the TIF district, flows through the TIF funds and then to the SMID, to the downtown alliance. So there's an extra step that got inserted there, that instead of the SMID revenues being clean and just going to the downtown area, it now, about half of it needs to flow through the TIF and is captured in that. We're not keeping any at the city level. Whatever's generated through the TIF district is passed on dollar for dollar to the,
So the property owner still pays the same?
pays the same,
Okay.
same total tax rate. It's just some of it now is flowing through the TIF before it gets to,
Different alignment?
yeah. It's one of the joys of managing those finances. Okay, the enterprise fund for parking. Again, this first couple slides is really a review of what the system looks like. We've got 7 parking garages that are in the parking system, and then a park and ride facility, an 8th facility that's separate. We've kept the park and ride finances very separate. That's a requirement of the FTA. Separate facilities, separate finances. We have 2 parking lots, surface lots, and about 4,000 meters in the system. We also fund the parking enforcement elements out of this enterprise fund as well, and that's where some of your staffing comes in, about 15 positions. We have a private management firm, ABM, that's managing the garages, and so the staff that we have at the city level is at the management level and then at the parking meter and enforcement side. As far as what the numbers look like for the current year, 14, you see the fund balance at about $1.7 million, and then the ending fund balance at $1.2 million. So we are operating in a deficit situation with our parking. It's very challenging, depending on what day of the week and which facility you're looking at. The capacity may be only at 50% to 70%. So there is opportunity with the facilities we have in place to do some different marketing possibly, to look at capacity as well, the excess capacity that's there, and try and deal with those shortfalls, if you will, in any fashion we can.
Scott, is this in direct correlation to the increased private garages? I mean, it appears.
It's in correlation to
Correlation, yes.
vacancies.
I wouldn't pin it all on that because of the
Okay.
employment-based downtown is a big
Shifted.
piece of that as well. So, yes. So what you're going to see in a couple slides following this, the projected revenues for the total system is stable at the 8.2, as well as the expenditures at 8.7. But it's actually the parking garage revenue piece of this has dropped, and you'll see for 15, the column or the bar to the right, at 5.2 million is about a $400,000 drop in revenues. So it really is an exercise in trying to understand, have we hit bottom on the parking garage revenues or not? And don't really have that answer yet. We're just trying to continue to work through what the rates are and what leasing opportunities we have on a monthly basis as well.
You also
So-
look at the garage by garage, and I'm sure you do, but because there may be some garages that certainly have a different occupancy rate than others.
Right. And as you might imagine, there's seasonality to some, closer to other events that get hosted downtown may do well at times. One of the adjustments that I'll give, credit to the engineering is in the council, you approve the evening parking for events, and that's generated quite a bit of funds, I believe 450,000 a year. So if not for that, the revenue drop would be even worse. So we're being creative where we can to generate more revenue and be smart about that. So
Let me ask this, and maybe back to Christine's question. What do you have something that shows the number of parking spaces available downtown, which would include the private sector lots? And-
right, there was a parking study that was just recently done. I believe that was
Okay.
a couple months back.
So what's the number, have we seen an increase in number of total spaces in downtown? What are we seeing?
Bring Jennifer up.
Mayor and members of the council, Jennifer Bohack, City Traffic Engineer. I don't have the exact numbers. I can get them to you, but I can talk a little bit about what we've seen split-wise. One big trend we have seen is the city used to have a large portion of the parking in downtown, and the trend we've seen over the years, if you factor in the parking, the private parking, we now own more about 45 to 55. It's about a 45-55 split, where it used to be more of a 70-30 or 60-40 split. So we've definitely seen that trend shift more to, we don't have the majority of the parking controlled in downtown like we used to, as more of these entities have built their own private parking.
Maybe if you could, I don't know if everybody else wants it, but boy, I'd sure like to see that let's say, 15-year study on that, or whatever, however far back you have those numbers.
Okay, yep.
As to how that percentage is switched over time, because it also addresses some of our other issues, because, lots of people think that we ought to continue building more parking garages. These numbers would tell me that maybe we ought to be careful how we do that.
Yep, I can definitely provide that.
Jennifer, are we tracking like bus ridership and carpooling and bicycle usage to see if those are up and if it's a correlating number to the parking
Dart-
lot usage.
DART has that, and
Job.
it would be nice to see that because it is up about 11%.
Right.
Bicycle ridership is off the charts.
Sure, we do have the, DCA has been managing the Transportation Management Association. We get a monthly report through the MPO. So I can kind of compile a document that shows all those different numbers along with parking.
Christine, does that mean that the ridership coming into downtown is up 11%?
It's a combination of all of the different routes, but it's up 11% overall, and which would include some of the express routes, which would be coming downtown.
I'd sure like to see the ones that are bringing people into downtown, see how those numbers are doing.
All of them ultimately end up downtown, so I would,
You got it by route. I mean,
Yeah.
you can tell each part of the city in that.
yeah.
Two things. One, the development of the private parking garages, you know, you could look at these numbers and also hunch that that was a real savior. Had we put all the capital in to build additional parking garages in our public system, and the revenues didn't match, that gap could be millions instead of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's one way of looking at it. Rick or Jennifer, at some point, we've talked about not being able to continue from a safety standpoint, the parking structure at,
Fifth and Walnut.
yeah, I always call it the J.C. Penney's, but since that hasn't been there for 20 years, we probably shouldn't. Is that in this year? I mean, is that one of the reasons for the projected decrease that we're going to take that out of the system?
Actually, are you going to cover that?
Just a little bit, but that is part of it, but it's a very difficult analysis to know exactly how much we're going to lose, because we do have other garages that we can ship people to.
Yeah, that garage is bringing in about $250,000, $250,000 a year on average, kind of net revenue. And so ideally, we have already started to work with a lot of that parking is courthouse related, so we're working, and jury related. So we're working with the county to change a lot of the information that goes out to jurors, encourage them to park at 8th and Mulberry and 4th and Grand. So we're hoping to keep that revenue in the system if, as that facility does need to come down.
Manager.
Sure.
Well, I wanted to kind of tie some things together from Mr. Coleman's question and the mayor's comment a moment ago. One of the strategies going forward is to control your supply, and by removing the Fifth and Walnut or the Penny's garage from that supply, or maybe downsizing it with a smaller garage in the future, and reducing the supply or the inventory, that should ultimately improve our situation in terms of the amount of vacancies. So that strategy of downsizing, or maybe some would say right-sizing the parking system, is something you're going to have to look at in the coming years, combined with, I think, a more effective strategy on marketing what we've got. I don't think we have stepped up on our marketing efforts in terms of our parking. We do have a great product, and it's out there, and maybe in combination with looking at our rate structure, that's something that we can do to help our overall occupancy rates and ultimately our revenues as well. But right-sizing the system is going to be critical, and it's going to face you because some of your garages, like Fifth and Walnut or the 7th and Grand garage, which is now in play, are going to be opportunities for you to do that right-sizing, which hopefully will improve your numbers long-term.
Rick, along Martin Luther King, we've got some large-sized parking lots there that don't belong to us. I would assume that in the future, those will be developed. If we have any kind of plans for those, we need to know that, because those people, there's a lot of cars that park along there, and they would have to be directed to a parking garage or another facility somewhere.
Mr. Moore, you're right about that. And a lot of that land, particularly in the south side of M.L. King, is great development property, and so hopefully it'll be turned into something that generates taxes and building.
Mr. Manager, I think one of the other possibilities, because these garages, a number of them were built originally for retail, and as retail moved out of downtown, there wasn't that demand, especially for short-term parking. And so we switched a lot of these lots from short-term to long-term parking. And I remember back in the 80s, we had this discussion because retailers were worried about parking, and it seemed like the commercial uses were taking it over. As we talk about redoing retail on Walnut Street and seeing what's going on in the East Village and some of the other areas, there may be a need to to have that kind of parking as well in close proximity to what we hope to be a rejuvenation of the retail in downtown Des Moines.
Mayor,
So-
you're right on. Those are right on comments, so.
Scott, on the projected expenditures, are those just cash expenditures, or does that include depreciation?
No, just the capital, what we actually do in capital to address depreciation.
Ongoing expenses? and
Yes.
that, or- okay.
Yes. Again, the revenues at 8.2 million is stable even with a decrease in the garage revenue because the TIF has been increased due to the debt restructuring that went on in 2012. And you may recall that was purposely structured to generate some cash back in 2012 to address some projects, capital repairs with cash instead of needing to do an additional borrowing. So the bonds were refunded. You see here the 2012 GO debt was a refunding. I guess it's the lighter blue. And then on top of that is the $400,000 payment annually to the general fund. There are two pieces of debt in the parking outstanding today, the 2012 and then an interfund loan from the general fund that's paid $400,000 a year. And if you recall, just so you remember, the general fund loan was only because we received a large payment through early payment from a UPS agreement back in late 2011, I believe. And so those funds were in excess of what was planned, and it was an opportunity to loan those funds to the parking, to save the parking interest cost. So that allowed for a lot of projects, one-time capital projects to get completed with cash over the past 18 months. But now we're in a situation where the TIF is paying for about 1.2 million of the annual debt service, so about half of the annual debt service. And I think the other point of this slide is that as new capital costs or replacement of garages needs to occur, with whether that be 5th and Walnut, 7th and Grand, or even 9th and Locust has some large repairs that need to get done. The assumption is there'll likely need to be some additional TIF support beyond what you see here, where it would, if nothing else were to occur, the TIF would drop off. But we're likely to add new debt and therefore new TIF support as well to the parking enterprise. I've just added some summaries, kind of what we've already spoken about. Rick addressed the need to look at the rates and the fees and some marketing elements. The engineering continues to make the necessary improvements. There's a lot of LED lighting replacement going on, new technology with the gate systems for efficiencies there. That's looked at, includes software. Clearly, the garages exist as an element of economic development. That's why the TIF discussion needs to remain. There is a schedule that you'll see for the demolition of 7th and Grand and 5th and Walnut on the next slide. Get into that now. Showing you a little bit of the past at the top of this slide. Since 2004, this is the capital expenditures. And then the middle table, if you will, is moving forward. This is what would be shown in our CIP document in March, finishing up on 5th and Keogh rehabs, the fiscal year 14. Let's see, we got ADA that's finishing up. We got 5th and Walnut coming down, calendar year 15, and LED lighting finishing up. The parking facility rehab repair, you'll see 2.2 million in fiscal year 14. That's the 9th and Locust repairs. There is painting of the steel that needs to be done on every deck level. And that's actually, even though it just sounds like painting shouldn't be that difficult, it's quite an exhaustive process of removing the existing paint, sandblasting, and procedures that they have. to get down to the steel, make sure there's, the steel's of still good quality, if there's any issues of repair, and then the painting occurs after that point. My point is that 2.28 million, about 2 million of that cost is associated with Ninth and Locust. And then we've plugged in 250,000 a year just for necessary annual depreciation type repairs that need to be addressed moving forward. You'll see on 7th and Grand, it also needs to come down in calendar year 15, but we're not certain at this point how much of the city cost will be incurred for that. Obviously, there's discussions going on with private developers, so we're looking to understand better over the next 6 months what those costs might be. So that's the capital side of the parking as well. Park and ride, again, is kept separate. 2.7 million was the starting balance of the current year. We're looking to put 1 million aside for the BRT program, the bus rapid transit, $1.3 million of revenue, $1.4 million of expenses, so the balance will come down to about $1.6 million. The capital reserve is at $2.5 million, so that's not shown here. So we do have a separate capital reserve, $2.5 million. The annual expenditures includes the $680,000 a year payment to DART, which lowers the citizens of Des Moines tax rate associated with DART each year. So we've got a situation here with the park and ride as well, where there is a deficit. So we're spending down the fund balance. Now we're starting with a very healthy 1.6. So the 300,000 a year deficit that's being shown here, the balance will cover that for quite a few years, with the intent, again, spending more time trying to understand what additional revenues can be generated with the park and ride facility to lower that deficit each year, and hopefully then avoid zeroing out the fund balance entirely. Another open end here with the park and ride is we don't have all the answers yet with the FTA. We're still working through those.
Okay, I wondered if
as
we'd
well.
gotten a response back.
No, we do not. So we're continuing to try and finalize. One of the questions they have for us is justifying the ending balance of the operations. So we've already provided them similar numbers to what you see here, and to make the case that we ought to be able to keep the operating reserves, the full 1.6 million, because we see these anticipated deficits coming. The last thing we want to do is draw that fund balance down to 300,000 or 400,000 and not be able to cover future deficits.
So when did we respond to them? What was the date of that we sent the letter?
Most recent.
Yeah, which time?
was gonna
I guess
say-
the last one. Last time we had correspondence.
A month ago?
It's been
Was it a month ago?
It's been within the month.
3 weeks maybe?
Okay.
Christine, there's been ongoing dialogue
Yeah.
and phone conversation and so on.
Okay.
Rick, but haven't you been in telephone conversations, Frank and you and Scott?
Yes,
I
yes.
thought you
And
had-
it's, I'd say going pretty well at this point, so.
Okay, good.
Hopefully we'll get a result.
Thank you.
That's all the presentation. Thank you.
Lots of information.
Thank you, Scott. Let's move quickly to our Sustainable Local Government Collaborative.
Mr. Mayor, may I make just a couple introductory comments? It's, we're a little bit behind schedule. It's about 13 minutes before your next topic at 8:30. So what I'd suggest is that we'll launch into this at 8:30. If you want us to stop, you can take up your meeting, and then if there's time left over after that, we can come back to it. Is that acceptable, or?
It's fine.
It's fine with me.
Yep.
Rest, everybody else?
Pat's up here ready to go. I just wanted to make a couple of very quick introductory comments. One of the themes that the council has stressed with me over the years has been the whole notion of looking for opportunities for collaboration among and between local government units. We've done that off and on over the period, sometimes with some real significant success. Well, when the Capital Crossroads effort came along, one of the things that they did was to add to that focus. They have encouraged through their efforts different team-building efforts to try to look at collaboration. That effort has resulted in 4 different subjects in the public works, engineering, areas, and we have 4 of those presentations for you this morning. Pat Kazitska is going to start off with the first one here. But before he does that, I did want to mention that as part of that effort, we've been asked to support, basically it's a team building effort that's coordinated through DMAC. It costs about $1,200 a year from each community that participates. We intend to do that participation. It's yielded some very positive results thus far, and so we'll continue to do that. So sorry for that sort of rambling introduction, but Pat, if you would launch into your piece.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Pat Kazitska, Public Works Director, City of Des Moines. I'm here to share with you the collaborative work that's been put together among my counterparts in the suburbs with regarding the vegetative debris management. As you know, every time we have an event, whether or not it be shear winds in the early summer or August area or September, or ice storms late fall or early spring, we have a variance in service levels across the communities. The intent of this program was to provide a path of consistency that we can use in the future. In the interest of time, I'll be very brief and be prepared to answer any questions you have. I'm pleased to have with me this morning a committee member, John Davis with Polk County Emergency Management, who's been working with us on every meeting. And also we have a close coordination with our friends at the Metro Waste Authority. This is the sort of situation you can see after a shear wind situation. These are the members of the committee that have been assisting with this, and Metro Waste Authority, again, a major player with us. Basically, the proposed plan allows for flexibility and path for consistency. It creates a standard tool to assess where the damage occurred, allows for alternatives, meets funding requirements of FEMA, and becomes a framework for responding to property owner inquiries. Communication is a very important thing as we go along, and it permits targeting of the services, service level variances, and basic requirements. This is basically what we mean when we talk about damage assessment. Where did it occur and what degree of damage? This is simply an example of how an event can cross several communities, and we have what is the central area, the destroyed area, maybe a major area, and a minor debris, and I'll show you examples of that. Here would be an example of minor debris. A few branches down, we expect people to cut and bundle those and put them at the curb. We pick them up every week, as you know, with a composted sticker. We also provide drop-off locations here in the city of Des Moines. People are welcome to take them to Metro Park East landfill, or if they want a private service, they can call. Now, when we get into a little heavier debris, we have major level of debris, and in this, we really see a lot more use of our scrub site that we have, and you know we open that up more frequently for people to be able to bring their debris when it gets into a little heavier component. Of course, we get into the complete destroyed area here. This may be the result of a tornado, as an example here, and is way beyond routine curbside collection and will range down to maybe even assistance at the curb with agreement of council. The important thing here is that we have the consideration of FEMA review. FEMA may not refund when you routinely provide a service. Then when they come along, they say, hey, just because the checkbook's open, don't expect us to pay for it if you do it routinely. So the key is to maintain that level of service and only extend it in emergency situations. At the bottom, we have emergency contingency funding. Currently, we maintain about $500,000 in our solid waste enterprise account to assist with this, City of Des Moines. The important thing in the City of Des Moines is when we get into those heavier storms, we have that forestry section that can help us address the street trees, and that's critical to keeping those roads open. In summary, this permits for targeted services, scalable levels of service, facilitates identifying the area damage, the extent, and the applicable service levels and FEMA requirements. The next steps, we want to work with John and my counterparts to deal with other types of debris management, white goods, house goods, hazardous waste, other items, develop regional training for damage assessment. We get into a storm situation here, our forestry crews are dealing with the street trees. They don't have time to go out and assess what's happened, so we're going to work interagency here to develop a damage assessment team, develop operational plans at the local level, and continue coordination. Our work isn't done. We know we have more to do. We're working with John to get that done. The call to action that we're asking today is support the provisions of this plan, which are consistent with what the city of Des Moines is doing now, and to have staff continue to work with Polk County Emergency Management for implementation of a complete debris management plan.
Thank you, Pat. Christine?
Pat, I like this. I guess my question is, one of the most upset citizen calls I get is after there's been a storm, and they read in the paper that West Des Moines is actually doing curb pickup. Des Moines is not. So are you telling me that this is going to be, based upon what is recommended here, that there will be consistency among all of the communities that are impacted by the storm?
It's more like a path for consistency. Every city is going to do exactly what they deem necessary at the time. What this provides, for example, if I go back to my earlier slide here on, can I back this thing up, Diane?
Backspace.
Pardon me?
Hit the backspace button.
Okay, thank you. If I go back to my slide here on the minor, you can see here where it doesn't talk about a curbside collection here. This is what we've seen often, is that another community will look at a curbside collection when we're saying cut and bundle, put it at the curb.
Right.
So that drops out of here. It's a path for consistency. There's a lot of factors that every community has to deal with, but that's what this provides for, and that's the discussion that we've had, is that in this case, cut and bundle, put it at the curb.
I think the shorter answer to your question is no. It doesn't ensure consistency among all of the communities. But as Pat's saying, I think what we're trying to do is get to that marker where everybody does more or less the same thing. It is very frustrating when we do one thing and another community does another, and then your communication with the public is different. We are painfully aware of that situation. We have to kind of stick to our protocols. It makes sense for us. It works well. It's within our budget parameters. And we would hope that other people would follow course, and this is a step in that direction to get everybody on the same page.
That's exactly what it is. We have a sustainable program here, a program where we will take it at the curb if cut and bundled. We'll also open up our drop-off locations. Very cost-effective program. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes. Can we move on to the right-of-way project?
I thought you went out and made it. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jen Dokovich with the Traffic and Transportation Division. I served on the Right-of-Way Project Committee. As you can see on your screen, we also had participants from Johnston, Urbandale, Ankeny, West Des Moines, and Altoona. Our project purpose is more of a long-range goal to create a comprehensive and consistent best practice for right-of-way management. The first thing we did was look to identify the issues. The big one is the different rules and regulations across the metro. This ranges from cities who have nothing to the city of Des Moines, who implemented their program in 2003, kind of leading the effort. Also, the more visible to the public, which is the poor and untimely surface restoration. Des Moines' existing program addresses this through our permitting, inspection, and making sure that our contractors are bonded and insured. And then finally, the increasing demand for additional private space in the public right-of-way. An example of this would be a Wellmark wanting to connect to a data service, or the hospitals wanting to connect their campuses. This becomes a growing need. Just as a point of reference, the city of Des Moines, we currently have 39 licensed right-of-way users and 24 million linear feet of facilities within our right-of-way. So our first step was to create a standard right-of-way permit application that communities could use if they don't have one in place already. And we used the Des Moines current application as kind of a template for that. We also looked at some of the other surrounding areas. And then a website where all of this information could be accessed by a contractor. They could go to one place, a one-stop shop, to get a link to the permits for whichever city they're working in, their ordinances, contact information. So looking forward, currently we have identified the current metro practices. We've developed a centralized location for access to the community's programs. And now we're in the process of encouraging cities to move forward with right-of-way management programs, ordinances, and permit procedures. And in the future, we'd like to look toward more standardized ordinances while recognizing community-specific needs. Those of you who are familiar with SUDAS, or the standard specifications, standard urban specifications. Those started out as a Des Moines specification, became a central Iowa specification, and now are a statewide specification. That's kind of like what we'd like to see this go, where we have a base right-of-way management ordinance for communities to use and then make it more specific to their needs. And then finally, just the continued support of collaboration between the metro area cities to reach the goal of a comprehensive and consistent best practice for right-of-way management. The more consistent we can be for right-of-way users and contractors, the more compliance we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions anybody has on this particular subject? I think the collaboration that we ought to search out in all areas is so important to the future of our whole metro area, and I'm glad that everybody's interested in speaking about it, but it goes everything from managing debris to looking at rights-of-way to some of the other things we're going to talk about. And also certainly Homeland Security, I think, is an interesting piece that we've all worked on for a number of years, and I think that these are good examples of good collaborative efforts, and let's hope that we can continue to expand them. I think it's just about 8:30, and so I think rather than start our next subject on the Metro model codes, let's move into our special city council meeting this morning, scheduled for 8:30. I'm going to ask the clerk to take roll, please.
County.
Here.
Coleman.
Here.
Reese. Hensley.
Here.
Happy.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, our second item on the agenda is approving the agenda as presented and/or as amended.
Move.
It's been moved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3 is an appointment to fill the vacant office to Ward 4 council member for the city of Des Moines on the interim basis. I will say that we did reviews, and we had 4 candidates that came and presented their position, should I say, and Joe Corleano, Becky Morlock, Vince Scavo, and Carl Voss. Alphabetically, I present those to you. I will say that, and I'll ask the clerk to confirm this, we received I think a phone message, is that correct? And an email from Becky Morlock. She withdrew her name from consideration a day or so after the presentation. We meet today to essentially have a vote and to try to get one of our candidates up and running as quickly as possible, and to move as early, quite frankly, as this evening into service for the 4th Ward. We discussed many different ways to do this, and we at least looked at having votes and more votes and lots of other ways to present this subject. I think that we are contemplating at least a discussion, or see if there's any thoughts. Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, I asked the mayor if I might be able to speak first, because I really appreciated the interview process, and I thought that we had some candidates hit it out of the park, and I feel really good. I wish we had told people that they could both serve on the interim and run for election, or at least apply, because many of those people should consider this. We had 11 applicants, and I was really pleased. And even some of the people who I didn't know as much about their background, I thought they presented themselves very well. Vince, and Joe was here. I didn't see Joe earlier, I'm sorry, and Carl. Is Becky here? No? But people did a really fine job, and it made it a really tough choice for us. One of the things that the mayor and I have said to each other a lot over the last 4 days is, this is not Washington, D.C. You know, we're not going to hold people hostage. We got too big of issues in front of us. And that's why from the very beginning, I said, you know, the perfect scenario probably is not that, you know, some of us get our number one pick and other people have to live with a person that they don't feel good about. But the perfect scenario is everybody gets somebody that they're at least comfortable with. I know walking into the interviews, I've talked to many of you, I think all of us had different favorites, and probably walking into there, we probably couldn't have mustered more than 1 or 2 or 3 votes for any one candidate because you know, there was a lot of good candidates. But I think leaving, as I've talked to my colleagues, and I think there is the ability to make a motion and appoint somebody without a dragged-out fight. I think if we all selected our number one candidate, we'd have 2 or 3 or 4 people that we were voting for, and it would take a long period of time. I thought 2 people in particular did a superb job in their preparation and performance at the interview, and articulating a vision for what they would do over the 2 months. I think all of us have a different opinion on which one would serve better, but I would be willing, because I think it's the consensus pick and the one we could get a majority support for, the only one maybe, and that's Carl Voss. And I would be, I'd submit that maybe the best course of action is to have a consensus around that, and to have a motion that certainly acknowledges other great candidates. I will tell you, I will certainly be looking for ways to get them involved, especially Vince Scavo, who I thought did a tremendous job articulating the reason why he wants to continue to serve this city.
So you have a motion to fill the vacant office on the interim basis of Carl Voss. Is that correct?
My sense is that is a prudent way to pursue it. I hate to put a motion out there if there is obstinate to doing it this way, but so that we can discuss it, I'd say let's put that motion on the floor so we could talk about it at least.
Okay. Christine?
I appreciate that motion, and will be supportive of that. And I guess just looking at the individuals that actually came and went through the interview process, just to echo some of the comments that Chris made, you all did an excellent job. And I think any time that individuals put themselves out publicly for a position and go through the interview process, that takes a lot of courage and commitment, and you clearly demonstrated that. And it's not an easy decision. I would agree with what Chris said when we all had different opinions as to who we thought might come to the top. And it's always nice to have the interviews go in a direction that you think, wow, that person really has a lot to offer. I hope the individuals that have been involved with boards and commissions, in talking with your fellow board and commission members, they are extremely pleased and looking forward to not having to fill the positions, is what I learned from several boards and commission members. But I think that everybody needs to be commended for putting yourself out there and going through the process. So thank you very much.
Bob? Skip?
I'm extremely pleased that we had 11 citizens from Ward 4 come forward for this position. And I'm very flattered that I was on the committee of 3 that had to narrow it down. We were directed to narrow it down to 3 people, and we didn't find that possible. We were able to narrow it down to 4. Through thinking through these 4, they're all very highly qualified, but there was one interesting aspect that stood out, and that was 3 of them have run for the city council before. And unfortunately, one of them that was very highly qualified, Becky Morlock, has withdrawn her name. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is the case we're dealing with. So taking a look at the three that are left, the thing that stands out the most, they're all involved with neighborhoods. All three of them have been on boards or commissions or currently are. So how do you differentiate them? Two of them that remain have run for the city council before, and they both ran against Brian Myers. Both of them have remained involved with the neighborhoods and the neighborhood movement. They've been appointed to boards since then, and from what I understand, they have remained in communication with Brian even though they ran against him. So I took a look at those two, and I determined, in my feeling, I think the citizens of Ward 4 have spoken to us in the past, and they actually voted Vince Scavo as number 2 against Brian in that ward, and I feel as though we ought to follow what the residents of Ward 4 have told us, and I would feel a little bit better with Vince being the nominee.
Ellie?
I just want to thank all of you for being willing to be a part of the process. I think this was probably a more uncomfortable setting than even running for elective office. Sitting in front of the council for 15, 20 minutes and trying to articulate what you're going to do in such a short period of time with such big issues. I commend you for being willing to throw your name in the hat. I would support the motion. I agree with the motion as presented. Mayor, one thing in terms of process, I don't know that the public has had a chance to publicly make a statement on this, so I think it would be appropriate to open it up if anyone came today. I know our meeting on when we had the interviews was public and was televised, so I think the public has had an opportunity to hear the interviews like we did. I haven't received a lot of feedback, but I would just like to open it up in case someone did want to speak or had a comment before we made a vote.
Okay. Bob, any thoughts?
Yeah. First off, I want to thank the committee for all their efforts. I think they come up with some real good candidates, and I think the quality of candidates we had speaks well for all those who are interested in serving. And so I think that with the candidates that we have, they're going to hit the ground running, and Ward 4 is not going to lose a day of support. So I'm in support of the motion that has been made, and look forward to working with the individual. So thank you.
Okay. It is our Councilmember Grace has suggested, we'll quickly open it up and see if there's anybody in the audience who would like to make a comment. Certainly in the past, we've heard from 3 of you that are sitting out there, and I would again follow up my opening remarks with thanks to all 3 of you for the effort that you made, and also to Becky and to the other 7 as well. Nobody knew exactly starting out how this was going to turn out in terms of making your application to 6 people, none of whom live in your ward, and that we're going to, make a conscientious decision. I think a lot of us have spent quite a bit of time working in your neighborhoods and with neighborhood associations, and a lot of great things have really happened through the years in Ward 4, and especially under Brian's watch. So I think that for each of you, it's a ward that really is on the rise. If there's going to be population expansion, it's going to occur down in that area, and I think that each and every vote that we take in this city council that reflects on Ward 4, we have to be thinking about the future. And all of you have stepped up to represent at least a piece of that vision, and I hope that everybody stays engaged and involved, and I know that you will, because Des Moines is our home, and Ward 4 is a huge part of our future. So thank you all for the 3 of you that are here today, especially for participating. not only in this process, but also the board and commission process and all of your other efforts in the neighborhoods and in this city. So thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that hearing part. We have a motion on the table.
Five yes, one no.
All right, Carl, congratulations. Again, I hope you've read through your agenda. We expect you to be fully participating in this evening's work. So we look forward to working with you. Let's quickly, could I have a motion to adjourn the council meeting?
Move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is closed. Let's reopen our workshop quickly on our third item under the Sustainable Local Government Collaboratives, and this one being the presentation on the Standard Metro Model Cities.
That's it.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, John Tkip, Chief of the Fire Department. I'll forego the introductions that are still applicable about Capitol Crossroads, and just say that we've had a lot of good discussions, and I think those discussions can lead to other things that we can collaborate on. We have two presentations. One of them is on a unified code process, and our Fire Marshal, Jonathan Lund, will give that presentation. And we also have a presentation on a fire training program, and I'll give that presentation and take any questions you have at the end.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Fire Marshal Jonathan Lund. Talk real quickly about our unified code process. Originally, we were set out to look at different ways to collaborate on how we adopt the fire code specifically. In reviewing that process, we realized we quickly couldn't do the fire code alone, and we need to look at a number of different codes. So we set out to establish a code official consortium and look at how our codes are similar between the different communities. And although we thought there might be a lot of differences, there were quite a few similarities. In meeting together with the other suburbs and fire code officials, we also had a meeting with all the building code officials, sending a delegate to that meeting as well. And we agreed that we want to deliver one common message to the elected officials when it comes time to adopt new codes. So some of the benefits that we're looking at when we form this code consortium is a consistency in adoption, interpretation, and enforcement, which I know sometimes brings some heartache when different cities have different requirements. This will be a much more efficient use of staff time for all the cities included. We spend a number of hours reviewing codes on an individual city basis and move forward with those adoptions at different times. This would also eliminate the perceived competitive disadvantages due to code differences in the different cities. Creates a much stronger network for code officials, whether it be building, mechanical, fire, electrical, plumbing. Creates a stronger network between the communities in how we enforce and adopt codes. Perhaps the biggest potential benefit is the process that I'm going to talk about here real briefly, is it would give industry developers a voice, or they've had a voice, they'll continue to have a voice, but now they'd have a vote in the process. We went to that format after looking for other communities that may have implemented a similar process. We found the Southern Nevada Building Code Consortium, and they allow multiple municipalities to adopt the codes at similar times with the same amendments. They do go through all the codes, mechanical, building, fire, electrical, etc., and they are all involved in the process, and that's one of the key takeaways from our research, is that they all need to be involved in the process because they all work together They're part of the international code document. I know you're familiar with how we've done it in Des Moines. We push all those codes forward together. We'd want to continue with that process with all of the metro communities. One of the things Southern Nevada strongly suggested, and we've included in our suggestions here, is that you need to have all the key stakeholders at the table when you're doing the review of the amendments, the actual voting on the processes that make up the amendments when we push that forward to the different councils. So we've recommended, building and fire officials, the different other codes as well, home builders, engineers, designers, and other stakeholders. I've just got a real brief potential schedule for you here. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we'd establish a code consortium. I'll talk about that in just a second of what that consists of. 2015, we look at the different codes. We've got public meetings and different times to present to council for basically a unified effective date of July 1st in 2016, that all the communities participating would be on the same edition of the international code with very similar amendments. So our recommendation moving forward, what we're looking at trying to establish is an executive committee that would be 4 code/building officials, and this is again a potential makeup, not set in stone, 4 fire officials and 4 members of industry. That would be not city staff members. Those would be home builders, developers, engineers, architects, something along those lines. We'd also have subcommittees for each code, made up of 5 individuals, 3 city staff from the different cities that are participating. So, Urbandale or Des Moines may have, and West Des Moines may be the 3 participating in the fire code subcommittee, and then we'd have 2 industry professionals from the fire protection industry. The consortium subcommittees would review and recommend amendments for all the international code documents. They'd push those forward to the executive committee. Again, the executive committee gives a vote to those industry professionals, and it also has staff on it as well. And those votes, or those executive committee members eventually vote on the amendments and push forward one unified document to the councils for adoption. So what we're asking for right now is just support and your direction to city staff to continue to participate in the formation of the Metro Code Official Consortium. And at a future date, we'll be asking or pushing forward a MOU that outlines the city's participation in the Code Consortium process. And with that, I can answer any questions that you might have. Yes.
Can you make sure that as you go through the calendar of dates and activities that you include the Metro Advisory Council, the MAC, on that?
Yeah, absolutely, we can.
They need to be part of that at some point.
Jonathan, who's going to decide the 5 individuals, especially the 3 city staff that are on the subcommittees?
I think that is what we're looking to push forward. We've got the model right now, but we need to set up the rules and regulations. We have the Southern Nevada's rules and regulations that we can kind of pull from, but the cities would nominate who they want to be on the committee. Okay. And then, like, we've got the Iowa Fire Marshals Association, we could say, we nominate these 3 people to be on the fire code portion of it. Similar to the Iowa area building officials, they could nominate 3 building officials to be a part of their subcommittee.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any questions?
Many of us are involved in some regional things. This is a really tiny thing, but as you build out, I think if you go back one slide, you build out your subcommittees and other things. I do know that we'll be more successful if we keep our eye on eastern and northern Polk County as well. The people that have been mentioned are either Des Moines or going west. So I think it gives credibility to the process to have, and it doesn't mean that everybody can serve on an executive committee or anything, but really be conscious of that as we're building out subcommittees and others. I assume, because I'm not anywhere close to the smartest guy in the room about this, that we'll have really smart people that understand the unique situations of Des Moines. Not that we want to pull away from a regional process, but we have older buildings, we have taller buildings, we have older housing, all those kinds of things when it comes to code that makes us both competitive and safe. I assume that that's all part of the negotiation of a Metro code.
Yes, there's also a formal process looking again at the model that's already been set forth by Southern Nevada. They've got a formal amendment process, so it doesn't stop us from proposing an amendment to the national code to say we think this should be relaxed or this should be more stringent. And then the executive committee would have the final say. But again, that still has to come to council for adoption. So it doesn't prohibit, it certainly isn't saying that this is the one set in stone answer, but that's the goal that we're moving towards.
I'm not, nobody wants to sacrifice our ability to be competitive and to keep our people safe, but the more we can participate and help lead an initiative like this, I know we're not in session to vote on something, but it's a process I'm really supportive of and really happy that we're undertaking it.
Yep, agree.
Mr. Manager?
Just to follow up on Mr. Coleman's comments, I would say, and I'll brag a little bit on our folks, I see Phil Delafield out here and the chief. Typically, in a lot of these code issues, the other communities do look to Des Moines for leadership, both technically and substantively, in terms of what these codes are. So we do have a strong hand in it, I must say. And the other thing, and it was mentioned a moment ago, but I want you to understand the goal is uniformity, but in each and every instance, the code amendments come back to this table for your review and approval. You do have unique situations here where you're not like the other communities. That's true for them as well. So we have made sure that the council retains that ability to make sure that the codes do work for us. But all of that said, to the extent to which you can gain uniformity across the board, it helps us in all kinds of ways, not only in terms of just the ease of building and improving within our communities, but also from a competitive standpoint. It is disadvantageous for the city if we find ourselves with codes that are out of step with others. So to the extent we can be on the same page, it's better, but you will retain the ability to make sure the codes work for this community.
If I could add just one more thing, Mr. Clark, I think one of the biggest strengths of this process is, as we look at the City of Des Moines process, even in the past, we have our public meetings where industry developers can come and speak to our Board of Appeals and suggest items for amendments, but they don't have a vote in the final say. This process does include industry with a vote, and it gets them much more involved in the process, which hopefully alleviates some of the conflict towards the end and makes adoption much easier.
Excellent.
All right, let's move on to thank you very much, and we'll move on to the last item on our agenda, which is the presentation of the Fire Officer Development and Training Program.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of council, John Kipp, Chief of the Fire Department again. I'm actually giving a presentation on a topic that I'm familiar with, but I was not a member of the team. All the representatives from all the departments are trying to cover all of the different councils. And so you can see that this team was made up of fire chiefs from Windsor Heights, Norwalk, Ankeny, and Clive. Significant to the process was Eric Dunn from DMAC and Randy Novak from the Iowa State Fire Service Training Bureau were really important in this process. One of the things to remember about this particular team is this is the only team that has full-time firefighters, part-time firefighters, volunteer firefighters, and paid-on-call firefighters. So they have a pretty healthy perspective on some of the needs that the fire service has. There isn't a problem in that there is no training for fire officers in the metro area. The problem is that we use the same titles and we are close but not similar enough in how we use the people that fulfill different ranks. And we have the same incident management process. We're used to working with each other, but we thought we could get more out of fewer resources if we actually sat down and said, hey, let's line up our training programs so we get the biggest bang for our buck. There is one significant bullet on there that addresses Des Moines a little more maybe than the others, and that's the third one about the needing to address the differences between paid-on-call firefighters and full-time firefighters. It has nothing to do with fighting fire. It has to do with requirements that we see as a matter of employment and rights that people have, collective bargaining rights, civil service rights, and some things like that. And those actually provide some obstacles here in Des Moines that we won't see other places, because the end product that we'll see is that they've raised the standards, actually even beyond what we have here in Des Moines. But we, Des Moines, will have to take a look at those through a collective bargaining process and some other venues. There's nothing new that this team wanted to bring to bear on fire training. What's new is how to address it. The Fire Service Training Bureau has a lot of resources, facilities, instructors, things like that. DMAC is the same. Each fire chief and each department around the metro brings its assets to the table, and they seek to make a greater use of free or reimbursable assets from the National Fire Academy. I'm not going to go over all the elements of this slide, but essentially, as you look left to right, that frontline supervisor we would call a fire lieutenant here in Des Moines. The mid-level supervisor officer would be our fire captain, and the senior level officer would be our district chief. And what they are doing is they're lining up all those pieces from those resources on the slide before to say we think this is the best package to prepare our fire officers for the operations that we see in our daily work and during emergencies. It's a good package. It's actually, I put together something similar a couple years ago, and this is a bigger challenge than the package that I put together. And it's really good because it's coming from people that don't get paid to do this, and it'll be a lot harder on them than it will be on us to achieve some of these things. So I think that gives it some real credibility. The benefits really are better use of, and on a metro basis, of our fire facility, which we've already started doing some training with some others, and also the Urbandale's fire facility, West Des Moines fire facility. Better use of the state's fire resources. The Fire Service Training Bureau is really designed for the volunteer departments in the state. And by having partnerships like this, we can bring some of those instructors and some of those assets into Des Moines, and that's a great benefit. We don't have the resources to provide some things that the state can do. Really, for the city of Des Moines, going through this process, reaching some of these goals will help us in our goals to improve our ISO rating, our goals to become accredited, and this will also give us more opportunities to partner in the future. I'm not going to go over this. That slide actually is just representative of the fact that the fire chiefs in the county talk a lot, and we get along. We like working on projects. And so we met over the last few months and met with this team, and that's going to continue. And the action from council really isn't an action by council. There isn't any part of this in which the council will adopt or certify this. This is simply for your information. We'd like you to be supportive of this process. It really comes down to the fire chiefs in each community adopting these things and making sure that those are appropriately adopted, in our case, with civil service and with the fire union to make sure that we handle all those things appropriately. But does anybody have any questions on our process?
Chief, I've got one.
Sure.
Your slide about the solution and the different people that are developing this. Are we contacting Local 44 for their input into this?
At this process, no. No, this really was, there's actually members of Local 4 who are volunteers in other towns that had input on this. But there isn't any real adoption. They've seen what I put together before, and in the end weren't interested. And when we get to the point of wanting to do these things in a formal way, we would do that. Okay. But there's really nothing in here that it would be appropriate to negotiate. They'd be something that we would want to do anyway and make available for.
I'm not suggesting negotiation. I said input.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
The thing I want to, it says City Council call to action. We're not acting.
Right.
But it says support your fire chief in developing current and future fire officers.
Yes.
I support that.
Good. Appreciate it.
All right, let's open up our discussion this morning for any public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to either make a comment or clarify anything that's been presented this morning? If so, we'd ask you to step to the podium at this time. Seeing no one, thank you all for attending, and maybe we'll see you back here tonight. We're adjourned.